Walk into an authorized Rolex dealer today, cash in hand, and ask for a steel Submariner. There's a good chance you leave with your name on a list instead of a watch at the price printed on their site whenever they decide you're ready. Rolex produces roughly 1 million watches a year, and yet its most desirable models can still be extremely difficult to get through an authorized dealer. That's not just a supply problem. It's part of what makes Rolex so valuable. 7 levels from the watch almost anyone can buy today to the one that money alone can't reach. Level 1, the entry point. Almost every Rolex story starts here and gets ignored. The Oyster Perpetual and the Air King. Simple, 3-hand watches, steel case, retail around $6,000 to $7,500. These models are generally easier to find than Rolex's sports watches, though availability still varies by dealer and configuration. Who buys this? The 26-year-old with their first real bonus, wanting something that says "I made it," without the price of a car. A parent buying a first serious watch for a kid graduating college. This is Rolex ownership that's still just about the watch. From here, that starts to change. Level 2. The signal watch, the Datejust. Possibly the most recognizable watch silhouette on the planet. Worn by your accountant, your uncle, and half the boardroom without anyone noticing. Retail runs $8,000 to $11,000 depending on metal. This is where Rolex stops being a watch and starts being a uniform. The calendar window, the fluted bezel, the Jubilee bracelet, instantly recognizable from across a table. The Datejust doesn't say "I have money." It says "I have stability." That's why doctors, lawyers, and mid-level bankers reach for it before the sports line. Picture the newly made partner buying one the week her name goes on the door. Not for the client, but for herself. It gets you taken seriously without looking like you're trying. At the next level, trying becomes the entire point. Level 3. The waitlist economy. The steel sports models. Submariner, GMT Master. 2. Daytona. Retail sits between $9,000 and $15,000. And this is where the math stops making sense. Because the real price, what you'd actually pay to walk out with one today, often runs 30 to 80% above retail on the secondary market. Demand for these specific references can outpace what authorized dealers actually receive each year. And who gets one can depend heavily on the relationship between dealer and customer. Not an official Rolex rule. Just how the industry tends to work. Collectors call it building a relationship, which is really a loyalty system with no published rules and no guaranteed reward. You don't buy a steel Daytona. You get offered one, usually after years of buying other things from the same dealer first, sitting through small talk, showing up for events that have nothing to do with watches. At this level, people aren't really buying watches anymore. They're buying the possibility of a future watch. Level 4. Solid gold and platinum. Skip the weight, and Rolex will sell you the same shape in solid gold or platinum, sometimes far more easily. A full gold Daytona runs $35,000 to $45,000. Platinum with its ice blue dial closer to $55,000. Some precious metal models can be easier to obtain than the most sought-after steel references, although this still varies. Who's here? The executive who could eventually get on the steel list but would rather write a bigger check today than spend years proving loyalty to a salesperson. I didn't need the relationship. I just needed the price. At this level, money buys speed again. It just costs more to skip the line. Level 5. Vintage and collector pieces. Above new production sits vintage Rolex, and the conversation shifts from retail to auction house. a 1960s Submariner in original condition. A Comex Rolex issued in connection with the French offshore diving company. Comex, built for saturation divers working at extreme depths where a normal watch would fail. A military-issued piece from the 1970s carried into places most collectors will only ever read about. Prices start around $20,000 and climb into the hundreds of thousands for the rarest references. Original box, original papers, documented ownership history, unpolished case edges, every scratch treated as evidence instead of damage. Collectors here aren't buying a watch to wear, they're buying an artifact from a specific moment in Rolex's history that can never be made again. The watch stopped being a product, it became a historical object with a crown stamped on it. Level 6. The record pieces. At the very top sits a small handful of individual watches that became famous on their own. Paul Newman's own Daytona, worn daily for years, gifted to him by his wife Joanne Woodward, later passed down and sold at Phillips auction house in 2017 for $17,752,500, one of the most expensive wristwatches ever sold. That price has almost nothing to do with mechanics. A brand new Daytona keeps better time. What you're paying for is a documented chain of ownership, connecting a piece of steel to a specific human life. At this level, Rolex, the company, has lost control of the story. The watch belongs to history now, not to the brand. Level 7, access. And that's the real final level. Not a product tier, a relationship. Some of Rolex's rarest pieces never reach a display case at all, offered quietly by dealers to their most trusted clients or connected to the athletes, explorers, and public figures, the brand sponsors, though not every one of them receives a watch directly from Rolex itself. At this level, money alone stops being enough. What matters is being someone worth calling first. Every level below this one is still technically a transaction. This one isn't. It's judgment, not a watch that tells time, a watch that tells everyone else exactly where you rank. If this was useful, subscribe.